Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, How to Quickly Establish a Good Relationship with Leadership. We're thrilled to have you join us today. And before we jump into our conversation, I just want to say congratulations to all of you who are newly elected officials who are joining our call. And I want to emphasize that the Council of State Governments is here as a resource to support you in all the important work that you do. My name is Dexter Horn, and I'm a Leadership Development Specialist at the Council of State Governments. And if you're unfamiliar with our organization, I'll tell you a little bit about what CSG is and what we do as well. So CSG was founded in 1933 and holds a unique position as the nation's only organization that serves all three branches of state government. We're a nonpartisan organization, and we support state leaders in a variety of ways. Some of the most essential things that we do is first, we help you through research. We have a research team here. We provide state leaders with expert policy guidance to help you make informed policy and governance decisions. Second, through our regular programs, we convene state leaders from across the country, like those on this call today, to share best practices, learn from each other's experience, sometimes just dish and make sure that we're all able to vent about the things that are challenging and rewarding about the jobs that we do. And then finally, and this is an example of this third branch of what we do, we host professional development programs. One of our top professional development programs is the Henry Toll Fellowship, which is often recognized as the nation's premier leadership development program for state government officials. It's a life-changing experience for the state officials who get to participate, and both of our panelists are alumni of that program, so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So basically, what we want you to think of is CCSG as an extension to your legislative staff offices. We're here to support your work with research, technical assistance, and policy expertise in areas ranging from workforce development to interstate compacts. Whatever you are interested in, we're interested in helping you learn more about and implement. Every state is a member of CSG, and we're committed to helping you serve your constituents effectively. And this webinar is really a part of that commitment. As I mentioned, we're joined today by two of our distinguished Henry Toll Fellowship alumni who will share their insights on building effective relationships with leadership in their states. They'll help you understand how to position yourself for both the present success that you're trying to achieve, as well as future leadership opportunities in the legislature, if that's something that you are interested in. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists now so we can get them talking. First, from the state that I'm recording from, Kentucky, we have Senator Brandon Storm. Senator Storm represents Kentucky's 21st district, serving since January 2021. A native of Laurel County, Kentucky, he currently chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Storm brings a strong legal background to his legislative work, having earned a Bachelor of Science in Police Administration from Eastern Kentucky University and a Juris Doctorate from the Mississippi College School of Law. As a relatively new legislator who has quickly risen to committee leadership, Senator Storm offers valuable perspectives as a person who has had to navigate relationships with others in the legislature to get work done. And then also joining us from the great state of Washington, we have Representative Melan Tai, who serves as House Deputy Majority Leader. Representative Tai made history as the first refugee elected to the Washington State House of Representatives, having immigrated from Vietnam at age 15. Representative Tai's committee assignments include appropriations, civil rights and judiciary, healthcare and wellness and rules, and her journey from refugee to legislative leadership exemplifies her commitment to public service and her ability to build effective relationships across diverse communities. So as you can tell from their bios, both of them superstars, both of them committed public servants, and we as CSG are just happy to have them join us today. So thank you both for being here. All right, I'm going to give you all the opportunity to talk now, but these questions, I want you to really think and dig deeply, because I know that this time, as much as you feel like has gone by quickly, you've been in leadership positions for a while now, but I want you to think backwards. So when you first entered the legislature, and we're going to start with you, Senator Storm, for this one, what is something you wish you had known, especially when it comes to building relationships and establishing yourself right off the gate?
Yeah, I think thank you for having me, number one. But I think the first thing I wish I would have known was to be a little bit more assertive. I think when you come into this role, you're a new member, and I'm in a supermajority. There's now 38 in the Senate total. 31 of us are Republicans, and there's 7 Democrats. And so when you come into that environment, you're kind of the new kid on the block, so to speak. And so I just wish I would have been a little bit more assertive up front. That doesn't mean I would be aggressive, but more assertive, more go to leadership or chairman and say, hey, do you need some help on carrying some legislation? Can I work on a project with you? Something like that. I was always ready, willing, and able to get involved. But sometimes, as a new member, you're kind of bashful. You don't know how
Mm.
to handle that situation. And then I'd also point out that sometimes in caucus, we have a pretty detailed caucus. So we start out with the public invited in there, and then we break off into closed caucus. And sometimes, again, the new members, more often than not, allow the other members to control that conversation. Sometimes that's good if they're very educated on the topic, but sometimes your colleagues might not be as educated on the topic as you are. And so I would just encourage people to speak up and, again, about being assertive, not being aggressive, and just explain to your colleagues your perspective and don't be bashful. So that's kind of the two
Yeah,
things that really stuck out to me.
I like that. So really being proactive about the work that you want to be involved in, and especially speaking up even amongst your colleagues who are in the same party as you, in the same caucus as you, letting them know that your contributions are valuable, even as you still learn the ins and out of the state legislature. Like you have something of value to add to these conversations immediately.
Exactly. And, often too, and don't be afraid to talk to other people that aren't in your caucus.
Yep.
You sit next to them, you have dinner with them, you see them every day in the hallways, they're on your committees. You're going to need their votes to get your bills moving through committees. So again, establish rapport, establish relationships, and do it early. The sooner the better. Can't have too many friends in this business.
And Representative Ty, would you like to add anything to that question?
Yes, absolutely. I really love the idea that you can't have too many friends in this business. I would also add to Senator Storm's the piece of being you. I mean, before you enter this space, being the representative for your constituent, the constituencies that have elected you to be your voice, to represent them. It's important to remember your why. Many of us, even before walking onto the Capitol in our capacity as a representative for our constituency, first of all, we know our personal why. At the same time, in that engagement with your constituent, they have also shared with you their why of elected you. And I think being able to articulate that with your caucus, and I think both of us, I myself came into the state legislature in the majority as well. I really want to take this opportunity to speak a little bit of my learning from other legislators in other states who enter the legislature in the minority. And so I wonder if the listeners out there are listening to this webinar, you might be in the minority, which in general would give you an opportunity to be in leadership sooner simply because there's less of you. But please don't think of it as a competitive sport. From my perspective, think of it as what do you have to offer? And it's coming back to not only your personal why, but your constituent why, and being able to elevate that why, your colleagues will see your capacity in leadership through the ability to speak through that and be authentic.
Yeah, I want to ask a follow-up question here because I think that's a really interesting point and separate, but maybe additive to what Senator Storm was saying as well. So being assertive about the kind of work that you want to do, not in a way that's pushy, but just having people understand what you can contribute and that you are willing to contribute it. And I think that what you're saying, Representative Chai, being able to articulate your why could be a part of that conversation too. So are you saying more articulating your why when you're talking to your colleagues, when you're speaking on a bill? Like, what does that look like in practice for the new legislators?
Yeah, what for me personally, it's sort of like a reminder. A new members is often very, I look back as the question to ask. I remember finding myself frustrating, right? I myself is a trained pharmacist. So I sit in healthcare and wellness, and there's a lot of policy that would govern how healthcare system is being provided and set up. Um, at the same time, when being freshman asking the question, and especially if when I found myself sitting in a committee where the chair has been there for more than 20 years. So there's always that power structure. And so for me, first of all, know what I know and recognize what I don't know. But that why is not so much about uh, it's part of being assertive and articulate what you know, and hopefully contribute to the larger conversation within these policy considerations. But it's also for me a way to self-care.
Yeah.
Because of that frustrations of like, okay, I'm a new member. Often the chair would go like, what do you know? Because we know sometimes policies being in place has been the work in years. I mean, it's not something that we're gonna change one sessions or two. I mean, some of them in years. And as a new person who coming in, even though you're an expert in the area, it doesn't mean that you know the politics that take place in this work, right? And so for me, using the why as a way uh, to um, to recenter myself, to help me understand why I'm here, why I'm doing this. And even though sometimes you get scolded by the experienced chair, it give me the comfort of walking into the chair's office and continue dialoguing, continue understanding where you are in the spectrum and how you could be part of the conversations and not being seen as a new member.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think that the job that you all do is extremely challenging at any point of the process, but probably more so when you're new and you have that learning curve. So being able to articulate your why, not just to others, but to yourself, can at least get you to continue going to the table and being scolded, or having that awkward moment where you have to be taught a hard lesson because you just haven't been there long enough to figure it out on your own yet. So I think that's very important. And thank you for bringing that up. And I want to stay there. I'm going to go back to you, Senator Storm. But in terms of not just articulating the why behind you wanting to be in the legislature for yourself and your own sort of self-motivation, but sometimes I would imagine, even in your first couple of years in the legislature, you want to put that why into practice. You want to actually get your priorities, turned into bills that are heard on the floor. So what advice do you have for new members about understanding the power dynamics within the legislature and building the political capital that you need to get those legislative priorities supported early on?
Sure. So, oftentimes there already is power, hierarchy in place when you come into the situation. So the first thing I think you need to do is become a resource. You need to make sure that those colleagues understand that you are the resource that they need to come to for assistance, either your knowledge, your openness, your willingness to talk to other members, being assertive, again, not being aggressive, being assertive, and having that opportunity to go in. And if you see someone that you don't know, go speak with them and just start to get the rapport with other individuals. And so we all come from different backgrounds, different walks of life, different professions, different areas of the state. And so just going up to somebody who may be from a different part of the state, for me, going up to talk to them about their family or their background or something, and it just brings down those barriers and lets them know I'm not there to just talk to them about voting for my bill because I think, it's the best bill in the world. hey, I'm here to talk to you because you're a person and I want to become, I want to know you on a personal level. And I think oftentimes in politics, sometimes people believe that you have to be dug in on this side or on that side, and we need to say, you know what, let's see what we can come together on, and
Right.
try to be friends. And we have a term here, I like to use it a lot in my area here in Kentucky. You get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And so what I mean by that is, starting out nice, being polite to other people, more than likely is going to return the same kind of attitude towards you. Now, not every time does that work, but if you go in with a vinegary attitude, then it's going to turn people off. And so again, you're trying to get that rapport, you're trying to get those members to vote on your legislation. So be a resource, be polite, be civil to one another. And there's certain issues all of us have that we're never going to agree with someone on differently than our beliefs. But you know what? Listen to them and hear them out, and don't just be closed-minded, be open-minded. And I think one of the things I really liked about the Toll Fellowship is we had people from all across the country, and even some territories, I believe. And not one time did anyone really ever say what party they were. And I thought that was pretty cool because it wasn't about that. It was about friendships, developing the ability and the qualities to be strong leaders. And I think if you're going to do that, you have to have these kind of, these conversations going on, these thought processes, and saying, look, how can we represent our constituents, as a representative just said, and serve my people back home, but in the same sense, how can I reach common ground with some of my colleagues on some of these issues? And again, maybe I agree with them, maybe I don't. I can vote against their bill, or they can vote against my bill. But at the end of the day, we're still colleagues. We should treat each other professionally, civilly, and just have good decorum. I've seen people in our General Assembly here get very loud, boisterous, upset. And we're representing people. I get that, but in the same sense, we're not just talking to our constituents back home. We're talking to our colleagues. And today's webinar is about trying to become an effective leader. And so I want to just explain to people, sometimes you have to, bite your tongue, think about what you're going to say before you say it. And again, I would just try to say, have a firm foundation in your beliefs, but in the same sense, you get more flies with honey than you do vinegar.
Yeah, I think that's always incredibly good advice in any industry, but especially in politics, that you won't know all the paths forward that are available to you if you don't start with that approach of working collaboratively with the other people who are around you. I also think that building rapport is going to be a huge part of our next webinar's conversation, where we focus from the perspective of someone who's been in the minority party. I understand that both of you all have been in the majority party the entire time you've been in the state legislature, but Senator Storm, you work with people in the minority party all the time. And I wonder if that advice would change if you were speaking to one of their freshman legislators about how to be effective in the Kentucky state legislature, or would it be the same?
For the most part, I think it would be the same. What I did try to do when I first came in, the minority party had some freshman legislators as well, and you kind of go through that freshman orientation. At least we do here in Kentucky, and we went together and we kind of met each other. Found out that one of those gentlemen was an attorney as well, and so he and I started speaking together, and we're friends. And even though we're from different parties, that's still possible, And so what we ended up doing is we've actually co-sponsored some bills together, and I just think it extend the olive branch, and sometimes it's effective, sometimes it doesn't work, and not every situation deserves that kind of approach. But I think for the most part, if you go in there and you try to say, look, how can I be a good member? Number one, I got to represent my people that sent me here. Number two, I got to represent my morals. But in the same sense, I can do both of those things and also be civil to one another, and listen to my friends and my colleagues. And again, it's just about acting appropriately in the circumstances.
Yeah. Representative Ty, did you want to add on to that?
Yes, I mean, if there's one thing that I like to add on is like my personal experience. As I mentioned, I'm a trained pharmacist, so more in the healthcare. And in Washington, we asked a new member to request what committee they want to serve on. And I just want to throw this out there for new members to consider. Most of the time, we ask for a committee to sit on in areas of our expertise. For me, being the first refugee elected to serve in this in the legislature, I was asked to join the Committee of Civil Rights and Judiciary. So I am not like Senator Storm. It's like I have no idea, and part of me was like, yeah, I did not get any infraction. I never even have a like step foot in the court. Uh, no ticket. Knock on wood.
Good.
Right.
But from my experience sitting on civil rights judiciary as a new legislators, and until today, I continue to serve in that committee because number one, it gives me an opportunity to learn something that I have absolutely no idea about. And if one must see this as an opportunity to understand deeper the intersectionality, the connections between, say, healthcare, education, and civil rights, there's definitely connections in there. So that's number one. And number two, for me, it was also a way to keep me humble. Because if I serve only in the committees that I know really well, I will constantly thinking of myself as an expert. When one of those committee that I chose to serve on is a committee I have absolutely no idea, it's kept me humbled, and that helps with everything Senator Storms have shared. Give you a sense of sometimes it's good to just listen and actively listen. It builds the capacity of being asked questions so that you seek to understand and not ask questions so that you can argue back. All of those as a way of self-trained to be a more effective, not only as a legislators, but as a leaders, because once you become a leaders in the position of a chair or in the positions of the caucus leaders, knowing that being in the majority, you have much more diverse opinion in your own caucus, most of the time than the other caucus. And so being in the leadership positions, those skills would be so much needed. And when as a new members, and you can show your caucus those skills that you have, certainly is another way for you to move into leadership capacity sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so being able to show off your skills, even in situations where you might be at first discouraged because you maybe were assigned to a committee that you're like, I don't know nothing about that. That's really not what I came here to do. I think that what I hear you saying, Representative Ty, is it might be a mistake to think of that as a negative when we could also see it as an opportunity for you to listen more than speak, to learn a whole lot more about the interconnectedness of state governance, of these policy issues, and just be humbled by new information that you did not have when you came into the position. So yeah, thank you for sharing that experience. And it segues perfectly into our next question, which Senator Storm, I'll ask you to start us off with. What are some other mistakes that you see from young legislators, new, freshman legislators? We're not going to name any names, but what are some things that people on this call can try to avoid doing so they can see success more quickly?
Sure. So just like Representative Ty just pointed out, I think oftentimes new members believe that they have to speak on every bill, or in committee they have to ask all kinds of questions. And sometimes I've seen that more often than not, I see that kind of backfires because they stand up every time there's a bill to be voted. They always want to debate, and sometimes that's just not necessary. We need to listen, okay, and not always speak. Sometimes just go in there and vote the way you feel you should vote, but don't be rude. I've also seen some demeanor. Your demeanor is going to be really important, and so if you see someone in the hallway, you know, I always try to speak with them. And even if you're not in the best mood, you know, this is a stressful job and we have early mornings and late nights sometimes on the floor. But always try to be polite. Don't come off as being someone that has an agenda. I've seen that happen too, where this individual or those individuals will sometimes just get, you know, so focused on one segment and all the legislation they bring or all the comments they make are always focused on what appears to be a particular agenda. And I think sometimes their good points or good qualities are overshadowed by that. And be professional. I've seen some members be unprofessional either to lobbyists or to consultants or even other members. And so, you know, it's kind of cliche to say this, but I really mean this, treat others the way you want to be treated. And I would never disrespect Representative Ty, and I would hope she would never disrespect me. But, it happens all the time where you see that kind of interplay happening. And I think it happens with other members, older members as well. But oftentimes I see those newer members fall into that rut where they think they have to earn their keep or earn their stripes or, kind of forge their way. And sometimes that's good, but you have to do it in a way that is receptive to your colleagues and professional.
Mhm.
And, the last thing I would say is limit the number of bills you file. And you're not an effective legislator because you filed, X number of bills. Sometimes you're an effective legislator because you had a conversation started because you did file a single bill that started a conversation or that bill became really good law. And so, again, it's not about, accolades in the sense of trophies. It's accolades in what you've accomplished with your peers and your colleagues and the legislation that gets enacted.
Yeah. If you saw me laughing when Senator Storm said that, is because we were talking about that very topic before the recording started. But sometimes less is more. Focus your energy and attention on the bills that you feel very passionate about, but you don't necessarily need to put so many out there that your colleagues begin to resent you for giving them more work. There's a sweet spot, a balance that needs to be had there. And I think Senator Storm too, that goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of our conversation about how you really can't have too many friends. Like, it's good to have strong rapport and relationships with the people in the state legislature, because these are the kind of people who you need their support for your bills to pass when you eventually get to that point. So I really like you reiterating about the professionalism, just speaking to people in the hallway, these things that are very small and may go unnoticed, especially when we're having a cranky day because we didn't get any sleep the night before. They can go a long way. So yeah, thank you for bringing up those things. Representative Ty, did you want to add any mistakes to avoid that you experienced or have maybe unfortunately stepped into yourself when you were a freshman legislator?
No, absolutely. And definitely a +1 to everything Senator Storms has mentioned. I, I, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. To your point, Senator Storm trying to be professional, yes. I mean, we heard repeatedly from Senator Storm that you want to be assertive and not aggressive, and how it is that you catch more flies with honey. I guess I want to speak to, if it is an organic honey, it would be like so much better than a non-organic honey. I guess my point is, yes, you can be kind and you should be kind and nice to people, but don't overexert that, because people will pick it up. That's things number one, as I observe, because then your colleague would feel like, huh, is this individual want something from me? when it's over sweet. And then the other things from my perspective, which is I think is critically important in our work, is if you plan not to vote on the bill because this is not from your constituent, this is not your belief, this is something you strongly think it would not solve the problem it intend to solve, say it. It's
Mm,
okay to say that here is this one. I mean, I oppose it. I don't know how to fix it, but I'm committed to working with you to figure out how to fix it. And then, of course, the next level is I oppose it. I think this is how we can fix it. Let me participate in fixing it. Like, don't lie.
mhm.
Like, don't lie. Don't say, yes, I'm going to vote for it, or, and then ended up not voting for it like that. Like right, Senator Storm, like in our
Yeah.
work, it will come up. It will come out. I mean, there's because a good piece of legislation that eventually becoming laws requires so much engagement with
Mm.
stakeholders. It will come. It like don't lie. Uh, so that like I don't know how else to say it, but it will not get you far. And if it is your first term and that ended up be sort of like your colleagues see you in that light, it's not helpful in any shape or form. It take a while to regain that status.
See, I think you said that perfectly. Sometimes, the really quick ways of saying a thing are the ways that stick. So just don't lie to your colleagues if you want to be a successful legislator. But to dig into that more deeply, I heard you mention, be authentic in your kindness. If you're going to use kindness as a strategy, just be kind in a way that is real to you, and just be upfront and honest about what you want. And very much so be upfront and honest about your level of reservation for bills when colleagues are asking you about that. If you're not going to vote for something, let them know. I understand that probably people do change their mind, but it's best you can to speak to the truth that you have in that moment when someone asks you, like, "Hey, how do you feel about this?" Because you still have time to change it at that point, and they're going to want that authenticity from you. Okay, I have one more question for you all before we move on to questions from the chat. Again, if you all are listening to the webinar, you have questions for Senator Storm, Representative Tai, or both of them, go ahead and put those in there. My colleague Lorna is sending those to me to make sure that we get to them. But the last question that we have prepared for you all is really about trust and respect. I understand that not everyone who's going to listen to this webinar wants to be in a leadership position, but some of them do. So, what can you say to them about starting to angle themselves for that future leadership position? And I ask that because in our conversations outside of this webinar format, we've talked about how being effective as like an advocate for your constituents is a skill set. Being effective so that your caucus runs effectively can sometimes be a different skill set. So what would you say to these freshman legislators who want leadership positions in the future? And I guess that Senator Storm, are you okay with starting us off?
Sure. Yeah. So I
Okay.
just wanted to recap on something that kind of ties
Yeah.
in with this that Representative Tai just mentioned, with the comment about, more flies with honey than you can vinegar. I think it also has to be genuine. Don't just go in there and I think that's what she's saying, authentic, be genuine. And exactly what you just said, Dexter, if there's an issue that a legislator comes up with and says, "Hey, I've got this bill. I think it's a wonderful bill. Can you vote for it?" If you can't vote for it, just be honest and say, "Look, I appreciate your time, appreciate the effort you put into it. I just can't vote for that," as opposed to giving them some sort of false hope. And even worse, and this has happened with colleagues I've seen where they're doing a whip count. What we teach our people is, look, when you're doing a committee, you better have your votes on that committee and you do your whip count. And so you also want to have that whip count done on the floor. But if you're doing your individual whip count and you go to a member and they tell you they're going to vote for that bill, they're counting on you to vote for that bill. And you get into the testimony. If you change your mind, you need to convey that to them, as opposed to next thing you know, they're taking a vote and the bill fails. No one wants to be in that situation. And that legislator might have the decision to say, you know what, rather than going up here and presenting this bill and failing, I'd prefer not to have the bill heard. Other legislators would say, well, so be it. But again, I think it's all about integrity. And I would just tell everyone watching, and I think the representative and would agree with this, is, we're only as good as our word. And once you tarnish your integrity, or once you tarnish your reputation, it's extremely difficult to rebuild that if at all. It may be impossible to rebuild. So integrity, just do what you say you're going to do and don't do what you say you're not going to do. It kind of goes both ways. And, I just think it's very important to keep that honesty with your colleagues. And look, I've got people that sit right next to me and they'll ask me, you want to co-sponsor a bill? And I'd also point this out too. Be careful with co-sponsoring. I've seen that happen where, you may be wonderful colleagues with somebody and they say, hey, I've got this bill. Well, you want to co-sponsor it? And the signature goes on the bill. And then once the bill comes out in the testimony or in the committee, the member's like, oh man, I put my name on that bill and I really didn't know what the bill said on page, 47. And, so I would, again, just be upfront, be honest, have integrity, and have class with your colleagues.
And I may add, right, because we have the process of sign on to bill. And as a new member, sometimes you just didn't have the time frame to stakeholdering so that you can sponsor your own bill. So the tendency of signing on to bill, like don't. Unless you know the bill really well, unless you literally like read the bill, talk to the bill sponsor, check in with policy staff, and you feel really comfortable about it, then sign on to bill. Don't sign on to bill just because then you can say, yes, I co-sponsor, like right to your point, senators, of like the numbers of bill you sponsor does not equate to your effectiveness. And so the other end of that is like sign on to bill, just like you don't need to sign on to bill because in the end, it's really is your vote that counts. What you vote is really in public record. You're signing on to bills and you ended up the bill being passed that is in a direct opposite of what you were hoping the bill does. Then you have your constituent asking you questions, it makes it worse. And so I would like to add to that too in terms of that process of signing on to bills. But to your questions, I think like in Washington State, we have sort of two tracks into leadership. One track is as a senator being the chair of a committee, and so that like focusing in policy specific. It doesn't stop you from engaging in any others policies and work, but it's really about really specific policy of that committee. And the other track is what I am in as sort of like caucus leadership. And I think to the very beginning of our conversation, know who you are, know why you enter this space. For me, I enter the space with the mindset of looking at system. I have the tendency to see the connectivities between labor's bill and consumer protection. I have the tendency to see between civil rights, judiciary, and education. I have the tendency to make those connections and build those sort of like highway, freeways in the way so that things move in the ways that it's create the kind of system that they don't go against one another. That's number one. And number two, I came in with a mindset of how do I ensure people who come in after me be successful. And so I have the tendency of building pathway for others. And because of that, it's become a natural that I would seek leadership in the caucus sense, in how do we build the kind of path for a collective success. And not only in this session or next session, but more as many years to come, building that kind of structure And so that was how I see myself, and that was why I ended up seek the kind of leadership where I am now. And so if in your state that is the kind of opportunities, ask question, pay attention, know who you are, because then that way you know how where you would be best position yourself so that you, yes, in the very difficult work in the legislature, you find joy in it, because that joy is sometime of your very personal that tied in with your professional work in the legislature.
Yeah, so we have time for one more question. I want to get an audience question in here, but I don't want us to miss the really good nuggets from the conversation that we're having. So if you want to position yourself for leadership, and even if you don't, I think that what Senator Storm you've been pointing out is that you're only as good as your word. Make sure that your reputation is steady and strong. So, have integrity, making sure that you're speaking truth to people when they ask you. And then I think Representative Tai, you've added on to this in sort of investing time and building up the success of other people, not just yourself and doing priorities for your constituents, but making sure that you're building pathways so that other legislators can also find success, so that the committees that you're a part of have some synergy to them, that the bills make sense and they're not at opposition with each other. If you think in these ways, you'll probably be more likely, anyway, let's say it that way, to be elevated into a leadership position, because people can trust that you can get things done. So yeah, that's very valuable advice, and I thank you both for sharing that. The question from the audience, and we'll end after this one, is that doing all the things that you all have spoken of so far takes, of course, energy, time, a level of expertise that not everyone has. You kind of have to work on that skill set. And this audience member asked, especially when you're thinking about being in that sort of early emerging career stage in the legislature, how did you all balance taking a step back and prioritizing, if you have family, also prioritizing yourself while still trying to do a good job session to session? Like, just that time balance while you're doing all these other things can be difficult for someone who's new.
I'll let the representative start out.
Thank you, Senator. That is an incredibly important question. And I'm going to go back to sort of like why I chose the leadership path as an overall in caucus specific. In my capacity as deputy majority leaders, one of the area that I am responsible for is really taking care of caucus members. And I mean, taking care of caucus members doesn't mean that I'm going to send a carnation to a caucus member every week. That's not that. A lot of it is really pay attention to the well-being of the caucus members. And this exactly questions has been coming up a number of times. How do we ensure that the work in the legislature for the people we represent is definitely a priority, but recognizing that this work can only happen if the members of the legislature, and I specifically say that the member of the legislature, not just a member in my caucus, it's the other caucus as well, be successful at it. I do believe that for any issues, the ability to engage the strong support, and more importantly, the strong oppose in that piece of conversation is important. And we all know when we, as Senator Storm has mentioned, we work at early hours and a lot of time into the late of the night. We all can be really exhausted, and we miss our family. We miss our children. We miss the people who care for us deeply, and we care for them deeply. Those times are important because it refresh us, is anchor us as an individual. And so we make, that is the conversation that need to happen. And please talk to your leadership if you find yourself struggle. In Washington State, what we have done is number one, as I mentioned, I am that person that members go to. And I would have that conversation and then elevate it at leadership, because then that's how we build into floor working. Like, how many bills should we pass on the floor so that members have rest time, so that member actually have a little bit of time to take a walk. Members have a little bit of time to call and check in their children before they go to bed. Those are important for members, and we are very mindful in building that into our floor. When we voting on floor, we wanted to also, right, without stopping the work, we want to also build in the capacity of rulemakings, right? Like, how do we ensure that members, especially members from the minorities, uh, will not be shut out of the conversation. We deliberately making sure that their bills from the members of the minority get considered, because they too representing people in their constituent. I know that instead of having the primary sponsored always in the majority, we intentionally reaching out and ask if the minority would consider for any bill development, especially for new members, that is okay, that they would consider be the prime sponsor, so they can take that home to their constituent as well. And so we build that in leadership, the capacity for relationship building between majority and minority. We build in leadership the floor action, so members get to have time to take care of themselves. And I mean, all the way down to food, all the way down to knowing which members are allergic to what food. So when we have food available for members while they at work, those are taken into consideration. So not only they being cared for with their physical well-being, but their mental well-being.
Yeah, building people's personal needs, especially around time, into the institution itself, I think is a great way to make sure that legislators stick around and do their jobs effectively. Senator Storm, do you want to add anything to this, or or I should say, give any final thoughts as we wrap up?
Yeah, I would just say time management, that's huge.
Yeah.
You have to be able to balance your work life and your personal life. And one thing you can't do is be emotionally connected to one piece of legislation. Now, Dexter, you pointed this out earlier. You need to be passionate about what you're carrying, but don't be emotionally so connected to that piece of legislation that if it doesn't get a hearing or if it gets voted down, that you're just going to break down and give up. You know, it's a tedious job, and so again, time management, be resilient, and just take care of yourself too, because at the end of the day, if you're not taking care of yourself, as the representative pointed out, you won't be able to be nearly as effective as if you are taking care of yourself. So it's a hard balance, but it's something that's very important.
Yeah, and I'm happy you mentioned that. I've actually heard that from other state legislators across the country. You need to be prepared to take some losses, but part of doing your job well for your constituents, for the people in your caucus, is being ready for the next, I don't want to say battle, but for the next conversation. You don't want to fold because something that you were passionate about didn't end the way that you wanted to. There are many more things on the docket that day, and you want to be present as much as you can for all of them. So thank you, Senator Storm. And thank you, Representative Ty. We are at time, and I know that we could continue having this conversation, but we're going to have to do that maybe over drinks outside of the webinar format when we all get together next. But I just want to say thank you so much to both of you for being here, for sharing not just your time, but the incredible expertise that you've accumulated in the positions that you have. So thank you. Now,
Thank you for having us.
Before we close, I just want to mention that if you feel inspired by our two speakers, our Toll Fellow alumni, that you can join the Henry Toll Fellowship program. Senator Storm told you a little bit about it, but didn't give anything away. Thank you for that. It really is a transformative experience for those who get to do it, and we would love to have you. If you're interested in applying, you can email us at membership@csg.org. We can give you more information about the program, and the applications are due May 1st, so go ahead and get on that if you are interested. And then finally, another reminder that today's conversation is part of a series of webinars designed to support new legislators. Our next one will be called Getting Things Done in the Minority Party. So we'll bring together more of our Toll alumni to really share their secrets for building cross-party coalitions. Our speakers today already touched on that a bit, but now we're going to get the perspective of people who are not in the majority, who have to do that to get any of their priorities met, how they're able to successfully manage those relationships, and then just effectively advocate for their district's needs. And if you want to hear that conversation, tune in next Friday at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, and we hope to see you there. In the meantime, have a great weekend and be well. Thank you all.